They drove through the city streets without really speaking. First one road, then another, until they came to the European quarter of Brussels. They were surrounded by the buildings of the European Union. The car finally came to a halt in a street away from the EU buildings. Chris pulled on the brake and sat still for a moment. "Where are we?" asked Jack, looking out of the window at the surrounding buildings. They were in a side street in Ixelles, in the middle of Brussels. The street was lined with tall, narrow buildings with large windows. Along the street there were a number of cars parked closely together. There was no parking space, so Chris had pulled up in the street and a car behind them tried to negotiate around them. "This is your apartment," he said, indicating the building beside them. "We arranged it for you. It's very nice. You will enjoy staying here." Jack looked up at the building. "Okay, thanks." He opened the car door and prepared to step out. "Do you know Damien Green?" asked Chris suddenly. "Yes," replied Jack. "I know the name. I haven't seen him for many years. Why?" Chris turned and looked at him. "How well do you know him?" Jack thought for a moment. "Not well. I knew him a few years ago. I haven't seen him for a long time." Chris thought for a few moments and then, holding the car wheel in front of him, said, "We would like you to renew your friendship with him." Jack stopped and sat back into the seat of the car, gently closing the door beside him. "What has Damien Green got to do with this?" he asked. "A lot," replied Chris. Jack was now beginning to feel concerned. This was not what he had been told by his commanding officer before he left London. This was to be a simple assignment, an exchange of views between one police force and another. He had not expected to be thrown into a difficult situation on his first day, certainly not before he'd unpacked his suitcase and had his first beer. "So, tell me," said Jack, now beginning to wish he had stayed at home and not become involved in a situation that he was not prepared for. Chris sighed for a moment, collected his thoughts. "This is why you are here, Jack. Damien Green has shown up on our radar here in Belgium. It is a name that was not known to us before, but now it is." Jack shrugged. "So, what has he done?" "Nothing," replied Chris. "Not as yet. But we want to know why a British citizen has come to our attention, and we want to know why." "And you think I know something?" replied Jack, looking at the dashboard and hoping that his innocent reply would give him time to think. Damien Green was a name he remembered and vaguely knew, but he had not worked with him and knew very little about what he did. All he knew was that Damien worked for the security services in Brussels, but in what capacity he didn't know. However, there were rumours circulating around the department about something going on with the European Union. Chris tried to avoid Jack's question. He didn't want to reveal too much information in this first meeting. His superiors were cautious about this British policeman who was not at all what he appeared to be. "As I said," said Chris, "I have seen your profile. It isn't easy because the British police are not very cooperative with the requests from the Belgian security services. Our relationship is not as friendly as it once was, once you left the European Union." "So how did you find out about me then?" Jack asked, curious that his new companion appeared to know more about him than he was happy with. From our contacts in France and Germany, you are not what you would call the typical British policeman, are you, Jack? Chris replied, looking towards the man sat next to him. I don't know what you're talking about, replied Jack, now feeling distinctly uneasy. This man was getting too close. Let's see. Started in the British Army, then resigned. Or should I say, was forced to resign? Then moved to work for the Metropolitan Police in London. Got shot and then given a desk job. Soon moved to, how shall I say, a more senior position in the security services. Chris answered in a matter-of-fact way. He had read the file, even studied it. There was a lot going on in Brussels that his superiors were not sure about, and they didn't like it. Somehow, Jack was part of this. Jack didn't respond. He wasn't expecting this kind of reaction from someone he had just met in another country. Of course, what you say is wrong, Jack replied. I'm just a normal policeman working in London, that's all. Chris turned and looked at him directly into his eyes. He had piercing blue eyes which hardened quickly. Really? He said in a cold voice. Jack quickly turned away, trying to change the subject, and asked, Do I get an office while I'm here? You have an apartment, that is enough. TV, telephone, and internet access is available, said Chris, turning back and looking out of the front window of the car. We didn't think it appropriate that you should have access to our files and information. You are not Belgian. Jack was now starting to feel agitated. This was not what he had expected. He had been looking forward to an assignment that would be easy and involve a few minutes with his Belgian colleagues. He also expected to spend many a happy hour sampling some of the many famous Belgian beers. He was not expecting to have to do some real police work. Okay, Jack started. What do you know about Damien Green? I need something to start with. Chris stared in front of him, trying to decide what he should tell this British police officer beside him, what was safe to discuss. The Belgian Federal Police had protocols, and they were not about to share their information with the British. The separation after the British negotiations meant that Britain was no longer part of the European Union. It was not a member of the EU club. Not that they were in the first place, and no one in his service really trusted them. They had learned the hard way that no information from the security services was ever safe with the British. They were not to be trusted. Chris began to explain. Damien Green is, or should I say was, a British security agent operating in Brussels through the British government. He had a cell or a group of operatives working for him. They targeted European officials working for the European Commission and the Parliament. They specialized in corrupting European officials and persuading them to act in the British interest or other interests that were linked to the government in London. Jack tried desperately not to confirm or deny anything. Chris had just said this. Jack remained poker-faced. And if such a thing was going on, any such operation would have been disbanded after Britain left the European Union. Our government would not be supporting anything like this. Chris nodded. Yes, that is the official line. Yes, the problem is after the British left the European Union, this group was made redundant and abandoned. They have now gone freelance. Chris paused for a second to think. Put it this way, Inspector, the Belgian authorities would not like to think that a group of renegade British agents had taken up their old habits and are now working for foreign governments. They are also giving concern to the European Commission. They think they are meddling in European affairs. Jack was silent for a moment. Bloody government cutbacks, he thought to himself.